So, Babak, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Very, very well. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And you are calling in from London at the moment?
Yeah, London, UK. Absolutely.
Oh, very nice. Okay, so the reason I wanted to get you on the podcast is that you have started a business in nootropics, which we're going to get into. If anyone's listening and has no idea what we're talking about, don't worry, we're going to delve into it. And it's a type of product that I've been seeing coming into the fitness industry more and more. So I thought I'm interested in it, and I have a podcast, so I'm going to talk about things that I'm interested in because I think that other fitness people might be too. And you're a bit of an expert on the topic because obviously you've just started a company that specializes in this. So why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about Level Out, and then we'll get into the deeper, darker science of nootropics.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So I'm Babak Brazell. I'm the co-founder of Level Out. Level Out is a CBD and nootropics company for active people. So we make products specifically designed to improve people's exercise experience, basically. We've now been in the market for around 6 to 9 months, but we've been around as a company for the best part of 2 years now, developing the products and all that kind of stuff before we went live. And Level Out as a business, right now we just have 2 products, one we call Focus and one we call Reset. So Focus is a kind of pre-workout product, although we hate the word pre-workout. And Reset is a CBD oil for physical recovery.
Sweet. So for everybody listening, I have tried both of these products and I really like them, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to get Bob back on the show, because I wouldn't want to talk about anything that I didn't think was actually really, really good. But before we talk about the 2 specific products that I have tried that you've been making, I would like to talk about what nootropics are, because before I came across your brand, I didn't actually know what they were. I had to do a little bit of research. I kind of knew about it in a vague sense, but maybe you as the expert could tell us what are nootropics and why are they something that's creeping into the fitness industry and general performance?
For sure. And I can go on about this for a while. So
yeah, but you can.
For sure. Well, so I think if you ask for the kind of technical term of what a nootropic is, it's a class of substance that kind of boosts brain performance, right? So that's the official definition. And the most obvious nootropic that everyone's heard of is caffeine. And I like to talk about caffeine as a good example because it provides both the good things about nootropics and also some of the questions and like why people don't trust it and all that kind of stuff, right? Because caffeine, obviously everyone knows caffeine, it's in coffee, for a lot of people, it's great, gives you a bit of a boost, all this kind of stuff. I can't get out of bed without my caffeine in the morning. But also for some people, it doesn't affect you at all, and then you can drink 4 or 5 cups of coffee a day and it doesn't really have a great impact. And actually,
I think I fall into that category.
Yeah.
I did a DNA test once, actually, back when DNA testing was the new big thing, and I was very non-sensitive to caffeine.
Yeah, right. And you have the same problem with actually for some people it's a very small portion, but some people it actually makes them sleepy as well.
Yeah,
because
caffeine makes people sleepy.
Yeah, there are a small portion of people that caffeine will make sleepy.
Oh, okay.
So I think even with that thing that people kind of think they know loads about, caffeine, it's obvious, it's alertness and all this kind of stuff. Like you have this challenge in the industry, which is like there is no one size fits all for absolutely everyone. But certainly nootropics are a thing that I think are great for some people, and if you get the right ones, can really boost your experience of certain things and can improve your focus and help you sleep better and provide a kind of support for a load of different events in your life.
It's funny, right? Because I think of caffeine as a daily ritual rather than a performance enhancing substance. But there's like study after study shows the impact that caffeine has, right? Like it helps with alertness and digestion and metabolism and all manner of things.
Yeah, like you have like an element of caffeine before you exercise. It starts to increase your heart rate, blood pressure, and it actually has been shown to have a really beneficial effect. As a complete side note, and this, I don't know how much of interest this is to your audience, but as part of our workings with Level Out, we have discussions with quite a few football agents, just kind of on the influencer ambassador side. And one thing that has been outlawed at the highest levels of the game is like people taking really strong caffeine shots before games.
Really?
But a lot of pro footballers were having massive like increases in their performance basically just by having these shots before, and that they outlawed them because of that reason, because the performance was so much better when people were taking them. So I use caffeine as the obvious example just to give a demonstration, but what we try and do is level out. And I think what people are now kind of discovering across the industry is that there's a whole cocktail of things that you can kind of pull together to make you feel better and do better.
It's interesting. I was at the supermarket recently in the UK. So for listeners not in the UK, I'm going to use some UK references. But I was at Tesco and I was buying like some groceries, and someone had asked me to get them a Red Bull, and I didn't know why they weren't selling me, and the person had to come over and do an age verification. And then I realized that you're not allowed to buy Red Bull in the UK without being over 18 now.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
That's
amazing. Yeah,
because I was very annoyed because I was running late and I was in a rush and I was waiting, and I'm like, I'm not buying any wine or anything. They're like, no, it's the Red Bull.
Yeah, interesting. Crazy times when you've got to get age verified for Red Bull.
Yeah. So okay, so caffeine is the obvious example, but like, what are some of the other nootropics that are on vogue, or that people are using, or that are starting to creep their way into things like sports and performance and lifestyle and fitness?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm going to talk about the ones that we use to start with. So, I mean, I think another great example is CBD. So, obviously, there's kind of a wide range of use cases that people have for CBD.
Okay, wait. So when you say CBD, so let's break this down, because obviously in the US, parts of the US, you have like marijuana, which is legalized, and then you have it criminalized, or like various different states of regulation around the world. But can you break it down and tell the listeners sort of what is CBD and how does that relate to the plant that creates marijuana and the various components of it?
Yeah, for sure. So the hemp plant is kind of the mother of a lot of different substances called cannabinoids. There are many different types of. You can have CBD, which is the one that we're talking about today, or the one that we sell and that is legalized in a lot of places across the UK, EU, etc. There's also a whole catalogue of substances that sit under that, like CPG as the most popular second one, but again, that's much smaller.
What was that? Sorry.
Like CBG, which is a kind of sister to the CBD.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, there's all these other ones. There's I can come on to it in a moment, but there's quite a powerful entourage effect that you're able to get by combining a load of cannabinoids together. But I think the most important distinction is between THC, which is also part of the hemp plant, but that's the one that gets the proper psychoactive effect. So that's the one that makes you feel high when you smoke, weed. Whereas CBD gives a lot of the kind of other effects, but won't have the same kind of psychoactive elements to it. That makes sense.
It does. Okay, so there's interestingly, I spoke on a panel, it was a couple of years ago, and it was when I was working at ClassPass, and there were two other people on the panel. It was kind of a lifestyle seminar, and the two people I was on the panel with were a person that ran a CBD drinks company and a guy who had started a blood measurement and diagnosis company. I think it was called Thrive, where you like prick your finger and you'd send it away and you get diagnosis. And the general consensus was that CBD and personalized like blood biometrics and testing were two of the things that were really, really going to accelerate in the next couple of years. And I think that that's definitely been proven out by the number of different products that you see hitting the stands and at any kind of Holland and Barrett or sports stores.
It's wild, isn't it? It's absolutely wild. And I think that's also one of the things that makes CBD quite difficult to communicate about, because there aren't that many products on the market that I could talk about. Like you could take as a topical, like a skincare cream or a muscle balm. You can take it in a drink, although there are some challenges around that. But then also you can take it in an oil and drop it under your tongue as well. So I mean, I think it can be quite a confusing area. And also, candidly, I mean, I think if you take the CBD market 5 years ago, then the whole reputation, there was a lot of kind of snake oil chat and how it doesn't do anything and all this kind of stuff. But then they were taking a lot of CBD products off the shelves, and because it was unregulated, there was 0% CBD in those products. It was basically just peddling oil. And I think regulation has still been quite a long way behind, but I think the industry to some extent self-regulated, because now anyone who kind of thinks about CBD would rarely buy it, without a kind of lab test to back up exactly what's in the product. So it's quite interesting how it's developed over that period. But yeah, I mean, I think that the benefits are becoming clearer and clearer for people over time, but it's just a question of
So
the industry kind of catching up.
holding on that for a second, what are the benefits of CBD? Like some people listening, I'm sure, will already know this because they've tried it in one way, shape, or form. But why is it becoming such a well-regarded product used in, as you said, so many different functional circumstances like oils, balms, etc.? What is it that's special?
So I'll talk about it firstly, considering your audience from the kind of physical aspect. So I think there's really three main things that this is borne out. And in fact, it's quite funny because somebody did literally just text me this literally just now saying, "Oh, it's amazing what I've seen the difference pre and post is the CBD you've given me." So I think yeah, the first is sleep. So first of all, it helps people get to sleep better, but also and this is really proven out by a lot of kind of Whoop or Fitbit or tracker stuff, that people tend to get a deeper, more restorative sleep when they take CBD. So they're in their REM or their SWS kind of deep sleep cycles for longer, and that really just helps your body recover, right? Because that's the way that your body really gets better when you've been doing tough exercise. The second thing is people like it for kind of DOMS and like a light pain relief. And again, it's quite interesting, right? Because the US is way ahead, as you mentioned before, on CBD and all that kind of stuff. And initially, a lot of the popularity came out of things like contact sports. And actually, in the UK, you get a lot of rugby players who are really big CBD fans as well. Because I think
really, this is something I didn't. So I knew about like relaxation impact, but people use it for DOMS and pain relief and post exercise, post impact.
I think in a lot of the exercise world specifically, I know there's a lot of use cases around anxiety and stress and stuff, which are highly relevant. But I think in the exercise world, what you'll see is a lot of it is around that it grew out of that high impact area and a lot of the popularity. And I think actually in the US, they had a really, really bad culture of people popping a lot of painkillers, so a lot of opioids.
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? The opioid epidemic and people that have bad shoulders, bad necks, bad knees.
Yeah, and all this kind of stuff. And I think, over there, no offense to any of your US listeners, but or North American listeners, but obviously there was always a bit of a culture of kind of, you're feeling a bit, a pill is the answer, and it depends what kind of pill it is. The nice thing about CBD is you can kind of you can take it kind of without consequence. It's much more of a kind of natural remedy as a replacement for those kind of things. So yeah, you've got big stars in the US. Everyone from kind of Megan Rapinoe to Rob Gronkowski, Mike Tyson, all big CBD kind of proponents. And obviously the Joe Rogan. I'm sure you have as many listenens as Joe Rogan.
Obviously, yeah, our podcasts are totally the same.
he's also a big guy that's behind it because he's very plugged into the kind of fight scene over there. But I think for us that translates, but kind of translates to everyone, right? Because if you're on a bit of an exercise push, or maybe even just you're getting a little bit older, then you're always picking up these aches and pains and little niggles and stuff, and that kind of leads on to the third one, which is this anti-inflammation stuff. So I think the second one's more relevant to kind of muscles and bumps and bruises, but also with joints and flare-ups and stuff like that as well. If you're doing a lot of, either repetitive movements. I mean, I'm personally a big hockey player, and that's one of the reasons why I got into this in the first place. It's one of my passions. But like, my right elbow, like it's not so good anymore because I'm coming to the end of my time playing at a really high level, and that's that it's one of the things that helps with that. So I think that those are the three main things I think from a kind of exercise perspective that it really helps with.
Yeah, this is interesting. So a lot of people that listen to this show are people that either teach a lot of classes or they have been teaching for a long time, and they may be working within the boundaries of some injuries or some painful parts of their body that they kind of power through. And so it's interesting to hear about these different ways of doing it, because obviously you don't necessarily want to be medicalized, but if you can take something that's natural that will assist you with recovery. And you said like no downsides or no consequences. Is it the case that there's no downside to taking things like CBD? Like the downside does caffeine have a downside? I'm curious to know about this. Like these natural things that we all take, what are the downsides of doing this if you were being completely objective about it?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think the downsides of like caffeine are quite obvious, right? Because for some people it does bring out a little bit of anxiety. It can give you the jitters and stuff like that if you're really susceptible to it. And I think also it can disrupt your sleep, right? If you take it too late in the day and all that kind of stuff. I think whether you have whether there's kind of direct impacts that are negative for caffeine on you, I mean, I think you can bear it out by the fact that, you know, there's probably billions of people every day who are taking caffeine that doesn't really bother them at all. So I think it's, and this is probably true of a lot of nootropics, it's, are you using them at the right time for the right purpose? And if you are, then there isn't really much of a downside for you. You know, candidly, it's probably the greater risk is probably that you've got something that you're not very responsive to, and it's a bit of a waste as opposed to it being actually bad for you. And kind of, you know, the same thing kind of applies with CBD. I think you can broadly take, you know, as long as you don't exceed the measures that are on any kind of common CBD that you'll get, like as long as you don't exceed that amount, I think you pretty much can take it every day and it doesn't have negative impact for you.
Cool. So we've talked about caffeine, we've talked about CBD. Are there any other kind of big like nootropics that are sort of headline or billboard items in terms of when we're talking about this in the context of sports and recovery?
Yeah. I mean, totally. I mean,
hundreds more. I can go on and on.
The laundry list is really long, and you could kind of go on about it. I mean, I guess let me pick out a couple, and then obviously I'm more than happy to kind of talk about this with anyone if they want to reach out, whatever. I think one that's quite interesting and one that we include in our focus product is L-theanine. So what L-theanine does is regulate your alpha brainwaves. And what that enables you to do is kind of reach a state of kind of energetic calm. And it's one of the reasons we include it. It's really popular in like Silicon Valley at the moment. So people kind of like to offset caffeine with kind of CBD and L-theanine as examples, just like we do in the focus product. Because, you know, if you take on too much caffeine or you know, like a previous pre-workout product as an example, then, you know, people are really common with that kind of like beta alanine, like skin crawl feeling. And
I'll be completely honest and say that I remember when I used to be in New Zealand and teach at Les Mills in Auckland on the big stage there, before the days of pre-workout. This is kind of in my like sort of late teens, early 20s. We would crack a V, and a V was the New Zealand version of a Red Bull, essentially. And so I'd have one of those. And so I've been using caffeine to up my performance and kind of get me game ready. And the game was an aerobics class, but that same div, I needed to perform, and I wanted to be at the top level of performance. And then I have like tried most pre-workouts as they've gone through, and I haven't taken them for a long time. The simple reason being that I got to the point where it would wake me up and it would make me more energetic, but I would just feel like the pins and needles and like feeling in the face and the flush so what is that reaction? So anyone that's taken pre-workout, so we're not talking caffeine here, we're talking like, there's the Beachbody have got one, there's Jack 3D, there's all manner of things. What is it that made your skin prickle in such an uncomfortable way?
It's the beta alanine, and again, I suppose you could describe that as a nootropic as well, I suppose, because it has that effect on you. But I mean, I guess the reason that we excluded that from our product is because we hated that feeling. And I don't know how sustainable that is. Like, whereas for us, it's about, do you have, you know, because I guess a lot of people, and I'm talking the customers of your exercise classes now rather than the actual trainers, but you know, they probably don't define themselves as quote athletes. They define themselves as fit people. They're doing it 4 or 5 times a week or whatever. But you know, I suppose much like you these days, without putting too many words in your mouth, but you're doing classes, but you also got a podcast. You do consulting on side and all these other things. So I guess for us, it was also like there was a big crash associated with pre-workouts in the past. That you take it and then you're like you're up and you're going, you know, you can smash the workout for an hour, but then afterwards you're left on the couch and you can't even kind of go and do anything. So for us, it's about how do we create something that's as much cognitive as it is physical. So it has the physical aspect, but it's still cognitive. But then also something that I'm going to be able to take in the morning, and then I'm going to be able to go ahead and smash my day at work as well, as opposed to it being like you know, that's the end of it for me. So. And I think that's probably the future of where, you know, this kind of supplementation is going, because, you know, I think, you know, if you take the history of it, you had protein, obviously, if you did go all the way back, which was firstly just bodybuilders, and then And then kind of as time's gone on, it's kind of come to almost everyone kind of thinking, I should stop
yeah, right. Like like full disclosure, I haven't taken any supplements. I tried your products recently because I was really curious, but I haven't taken supplements for years. I stopped taking protein and I just decided that I was going to try and eat a balanced diet with like actual vegetables and kind of fish. I'll occasionally have a protein bar, but the reason is just because I know there's 200 calories in it and I just want an easy snack that won't upset my stomach. Yeah, but I've kind of done the protein thing, and I have friends, that religiously take protein. I've never been the kind of person that has any problem putting on weight. In fact, the opposite. So I've never been looking to like supplement calories or anything like that. But the thing I liked about the Focus product is exactly that. It's like it kind of made me energetic and a little bit focused without giving me all the negative stuff, which is like the heart palpitations and like racing your heart rate and making your skin prickle. I always, when I exercise in the morning, do my own exercise, and this is outside of any type of supplementation or pre-workout, I would always have a pen and paper next to me, because exercising in the morning, once the blood starts to flow, is always when I would have my best ideas. And so I'd exercise in the morning and I'd think of all of the things on my to-do list that I needed to do, and I would like stop and write things. And that was kind of the feeling that the Focus gave. It was like a little bit of clarity, and the same as I would have got if I had a coffee and done exercise at the start of my day, when I had a whole lot of things running through my brain to kind of give me some focus.
Yeah, and this is the mad thing, right? You're kind of writing our business strategy, which might be a great thing, because that's all that blood flow to the brain is clearly working. But I think in our ideal world in the future, you've got, because some people take our focus, like candidly, some people take our Focus as well just to do a day's work. It really helps them, because it helps them reach that kind of flow state. But then also, if you started expanding into the future a bit more and get a little bit more crazy, is there also like solutions for social situations? And you've seen, success of some brands that people, I'm plugging other people's brands I've got no stake in at all now, but the like brands like Free Spirit, for example, which is a kind of, it's UK based, but it's like a plant-based spirit brand, and gives people like a little bit of a buzz without any alcohol, and kind of forms the replacement in cocktails and stuff like that.
Interesting.
So it's a whole new world that we're kind of going into. And I think, again, to kind of diverge off the subject slightly, but I think one of the reasons all these things become popular is because people's kind of view of their own wellness is that the standards of their own wellness have got a lot higher, right? It used to be that, I feel okay, and that counts as being well. Whereas now, we've got a much more like focus view on mental health, on your physical health being not just I'm well, but I can run 20k or 10k, and
we've talked about it on this podcast a number of times, like wearables and Aura rings and Apple Watches and all these things that are allowing people to micromanage their own performance and their own recovery and their own sort of personal metrics. And so people now will actually see the change in terms of, if someone's got an Aura ring or a Whoop or any number of these things, if they try a product that's designed to either focus them or recover them or all these certain things, they can actually see the metrics of whether or not that has an impact. And the funny thing is that I think people have forgotten that like all of humanity has always done this. If you're someone that has felt that you're getting a bit tired and you went and got a chocolate bar when you're a kid and then it made you a bit more energetic, that's essentially exactly what it is, right? Because sugar is just another one of these products that creates a metabolic reaction that changes the way we feel and perform.
Yeah, I mean, it's just biohacking, really, isn't it? That's all it is. And I always use the simplistic examples, but you from all over the world, you've got slightly different things that people use, but essentially that's kind of what we're talking about. But again, I think the reason it plugs in so well with this kind of like wellness and active thing is that, as you just described, kind of more and more people are almost treating themselves like athletes, and that kind of that Aura ring kind of Fitbit thing. That but not only are they treating themselves like athletes, they're kind of pushing themselves like athletes as well. Like, it's not unusual to have people that have normal jobs, but they're doing pretty tough workouts almost every day of the week as well. And that's where you start thinking about, for us, I guess it's products, but how does that also change the whole suite of how people view themselves? Because the standards of and this isn't, there's a good and a bad side to this as well, right? Because it's like the standards of how you look have increased so dramatically in terms of your physical wellness, and that's changed hugely. But the more people that think and act like essentially a kind of a pseudo athlete, then the bigger market there's going to be for these products that do help you recover and do help you, give you a bit of a kick and enhancement before you work out and things like that, because there's just more and more people kind of flooding into this world. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
UK, but all over the world, I think.
Things like CrossFit and turf games and all these different events that people do for like that they aren't professional athletes, but they're operating at an athletic level, and that it becomes something that's important to them and part of their life.
Can I just say, man, that stuff is crazy. It's crazy. Like, because I played sports, and obviously, have relatively recently been as well, and I've had to go to turf and all this other stuff. I mean, the stuff that people are doing there, and they're not, like, in some ways they're self-selected, right? But the people that are religiously getting down and doing this stuff, I'm impressed that people are out there doing some of this stuff, and it is crazy, and you can kind of get to the top of your game. But I mean, I guess it kind of filters down as well, the amount of people out there that are now just at a level of kind of physical fitness.
I think it's always been a thing, right? Like, you've always had people doing half marathons and marathons or cycling races or triathlons, but endurance sports is not for everybody. And so now I think that things like CrossFit and turf games and all that sort of stuff have just expanded out the repertoire of things that people can do when they are like adult and past the point where they can be a professional sports person, but when they still want to do sports, be involved and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, it's completely. What's crazy for me as well is that what's really useful about it, I think, is it gives you this aspect of a game day. Like, when I've been playing sports, the game day is the biggest day of the week, right? And that's the day that you're kind of
the thing you train for, right? Like, so you're peaking up to something, and
exactly, yeah. And I can see why they're so popular, and why, because it's like when you have a marathon in 2 weeks or 3 months away, then you've got a very set training regime, you do it, and then you kind of set the next challenge or whatever. But I think that's why they're so wildly popular, right? And
yeah,
why
because we're seasonal, right? Like, at the end of the day, winter comes, summer comes, spring. Like, we're seasonal creatures that can't necessarily maintain that same amount of effort or energy all the time, and so having peaks and troughs, like just the same as like in a day, it's important. So you weren't always working in this. You were coming from corporate life. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what motivated you to leave sort of the city of London and start this particular type of business?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 or 3 motivations. I think some of them were just personal. Like, I always just really wanted to be a founder, and really wanted to start my own thing. I'm doing this with my best mate, which is also obviously great, ups and downs, but great.
Great, aside from fights.
And I think honestly, like, I wouldn't have probably phrased it in this term before, but when I look at my life, like, what is the thing that I'm just really passionate about? Like, what's the thing that I'd leap out of bed for in the morning? And that is just getting out and doing stuff. And by doing stuff, I mean generally just like exercising. It's not just all, group classes, but long cycle rides, playing sports, being outside, pushing, in that regard in almost every way. So I think when the opportunity came up and kind of be part of this world and part of that community, that was also kind of a big pull. And then obviously from a business perspective, CBD is relatively new on the scene, and there's a big job to do on that. Like, my previous life wasn't quite kind of City of London. It was more like I did a lot of work in branding at Unilever and a lot of work in business strategy across the retail and consumer space. So, there's obviously a lot of opportunities you can take in this market. But I think for me, like, the cutting edge felt like nootropics and CBD, and can we make a bit of a dent with that? And I think that's probably how Level Out was born.
And so, like, what is the focus of Level Out? Because I know that you have, like, looking at your branding and marketing, you are particularly focused on athletes or everyday athletes, so to speak. What is the goal of the company? Like, what is the impact that you're wanting to have with these new products that you are creating and putting out into the market?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think for the focus product, for the kind of the pre-moment product, I think as we've discussed, there's problems with the pre-workout market at the moment. And I think, again, if you look at the protein market, 15 years ago, it was only bodybuilders. Now it can be almost anyone.
Yeah, or you have Grenade, right? Did they list recently or something like
that's Grenade, right? And someone's made a huge amount of money.
I love Grenade. I have to say,
yeah.
I live in Paris now, and the one thing that really pisses me off about Paris, there's no Grenade bars anywhere. They've only got Whole Food. It's really annoying. Bakeries, boulangeries, and no Grenade bars.
I just think and it's amazing they've been so successful, right? Because when you see the kind of protein bar, like in my local Tesco's or whatever now, there's 25 different options.
It's crazy.
But and they're all like £3 each. You can get a meal deal for the same price. It's mad they're selling. They still do sell. But I mean, I think that, protein it's become such a like central part of our parlance now. And, you're supposed to be taking X amount for every gram of body weight and all this kind of stuff. But I don't think anyone's really nailed that pre-moment yet. And why not feel great when you exercise? Why not have the kind of mental sharpness and get your body in just the right place? And maybe it's not absolutely every time. As I say to people, like if you're a fit person, you've just had 2 days off and you've got your first class back on, it's Monday morning and whatever, and you're feeling fresh as a daisy, maybe you don't want it. But if you're anything like me and you're doing 6 days a week, there's several moments, or when you've got a big game, or when when it gets to that, if you're a trainer and you're, I speak to these guys all the time now, so I know how hard it is when you've got your third class on the bounce. How do you keep your energy up? or you've been there 100 times, I'm sure. Or your
this is when I use the sugar-free Red Bull.
yeah. Or your everyday, your everyday athlete who's, whatever situation you might be in, but it might be that I'm just thinking back in my head, if my co-founder was here, he'd be like, everyone should be taking focus absolutely every day. But I mean, I think for me, there's a moment that's 2-3 days a week, if you're a person that's doing 4 to 6 workouts every week, but whatever shape or form they come in, that you can get more out of it and you can make yourself feel better. And I think that's basically our mission.
And so, like, when I was just thinking, like, one of the problems that I've always had with and I'm thinking specifically to the audience that listens to this, is that I'm teaching an evening class. I've had a really long day at work doing whatever other job that I was doing, or potentially other classes. And then I wouldn't want to necessarily have the caffeine because I know that the caffeine will keep me up. How, like, does Focus do that as well? Like, what are the active ingredients in Focus that would be different from a classic pre-workout?
Yeah, so we've got guarana, which does break down to a little bit of caffeine. But what that does is it breaks down a lot more slowly. So that's why you don't get the much, you get much more of an equal hit. But also with the L-theanine and CBD, like I'm comfortable with taking it in the evening. And that doesn't sort of kind of affect my sleep in the same way, because we have those offsets in it. So I can pretty much take it whenever. But obviously, as I said before, kind of it's a difficult world to put a really strict rule on, because it really depends on how much this stuff affects you.
It's the kind of thing where it's all personal response, right? Just the same as alcohol, sugar, like caffeine, as we've talked about.
Absolutely. Like we all know that one person that can have a glass of wine and then be on the floor, and you're like, what happened? You're 6'5" and you weigh 100 kilos. How does this happen to you? And I think that's the same truth with nootropics and CBD and anything in this kind of realm. If you really got to find what fits for you. We know that this isn't going to be perfect, but our products aren't going to be perfect for everyone. But we think that for lots of people, they can be an enhancement. So I guess that's the kind of sorry, that might feel like a really crap answer, but
no. I think it's fair.
I think that's the only fair way to really talk about it.
Like, as I said, we've had various people on this podcast talking about like the impact of wearables and technology and different types of exercise. And one of the things that is really obvious when anybody speaks is that like so much of this is personal, and it's an element of figuring out what you want. And we talk about it in relation to classes too. Like not everyone's going to like a spin class. Some people hate them, but not everyone's going to like a step class or a choreography class. And so it's exactly the same. Like you find what works for you, and then you test it out and do a little bit of biohacking on yourself in terms of seeing how you react to these things, and then figure out what works for you.
Absolutely. And it's funny, right? Because I talk to people that are really into like really heavy hitting pre-workouts all the time.
They really love that Jack 3D kind of.
And I'm like, cool, that's great. Like, that's great for you. You're not going to be up. You're not going to be for us. Like the CBD will probably help you because you're clearly hammering your body really hard. But the Focus product isn't going to be for you because you're at peace with where you're at with that. And I think for us, like it's interesting because there's a whole broader church of people, like a lot of women really like focus because it isn't quite such a hard hit as well. So it's funny, but I completely agree. Like you kind of have to find what works best for you, and then stick to it, or continue to expand it depending on kind of where you're at. It also might depend on your different moments, right? Like I don't if you I don't know, you've done an all-nighter and you've got to do a marathon the next day, then you're probably going to have a different choices than if you're somebody who is in a great place and feeling pretty rested and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's as you rightly say, there's answers to every problem. I thought there also depends on who you are, like personality wise, right? We all know there'll be some people out there that overtrain, right? And therefore,
a lot of people that listen to this, I imagine.
Yeah, like you're overtraining, so you're probably your solutions you're looking for are like recovery solutions, right? Like if you're doing 3 spin classes a day, 5 times a week, then you might be looking from our perspective more like the CBD side to help your body really get back as effectively as it can. But it might be that some of your clients or customers and all that kind of stuff, I mean, they're struggling to motivate themselves to get up and do it and work out with the right intensity. So for them, it might be like, well, actually, there's a different kind of, be it focus or something else, the product that helps you with that. So I think, there's a lot of different kind of like angles that you can look at it from, and it's quite individual in terms of what the challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, sweet. So we will we'll provide various links to your website. You're available in the UK at the moment, right? So if you're outside of the UK, they can't quite get a taste just yet.
Not quite. We ship everywhere actually. So we don't ship to Canada, but we will ship to US and EU. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we'll add some links to your site so people can check it out. You have Recover and Focus, and like, are there any other, like, what's the next sort of Silicon Valley like product?
So the next one, the next one's actually going to be a little bit. We're actually just going to market with it. It's a little bit more boring, should we say, than like a Silicon Valley hack. But basically, right now, a lot of people take CBD in an oil format, which is what our reset form is. We have a water soluble format to kind of fit in with both when people take like coffee. So quite a lot of people, as I mentioned before, with the offset, people like having a little bit of CBD in their coffee, but the oil doesn't mix with water, so it's not effective. So we're going to bring out a water soluble CBD for people to just have a couple of drops in coffee, but also obviously in smoothies for like a post workout if that fits with a gym or whatever. And those have been quite popular. So that's kind of, we've seen, it's adding it into people's routines already. Be that, I mean, a lot of gyms, we're selling it to a lot of gyms for smoothies, basically.
Okay.
To help.
Yeah, I've seen actually CBD infused smoothies popping up in some of the gyms and studios that I go to. Sure. So that's the next product that comes out.
Yeah, the only thing about it is I think a lot of them are still using this oil-based stuff, and it's not an effective way. So I think quite a lot of, if you don't know much about CBD, I think if you just go and buy CBD and stick it in a shake, it doesn't really work. So that's what we're trying to hit with the next one. But yeah, there's loads of directions we want to take Focus. We're not out of ideas for sure. As I say, like, do you stick with the exercise theme, or is there also like a work or even a social, version of Focus potentially in the future? But yeah, that's all watch this space, and certainly won't be in 2021. So.
Awesome. Well, Babak, thank you very much for talking to me and explaining what nootropics are to our audience. I know for a fact that everyone listening to this will have done some form of pre-workout or pre-class at some point, whether it's a muffin or a Twix or a Mars bar or a Red Bull. Or
is that your official recommendation, the muffin?
Or something that's a little bit more specific, but I know that everyone will have experienced themselves doing this. And so I wanted to take the chance to kind of talk about some of the new developments in what you can do to ensure that you are performing at the highest level, while also avoiding any of the downsides of sugar crashes, caffeine highs, or the pain of a pre-workout.